everybody, and welcome to the Savvy Entrepreneur Show. If you're an entrepreneur or a small business person, or you're thinking about becoming one, this show is just for you. I'm Doris Nagel, your host for the next hour. I'm a crazy entrepreneur myself, and I also love helping other entrepreneurs. I have seen lots of mistakes over the past 30 years of doing this, and I can tell you I've made plenty of them all by myself. The show has two goals, really. First, to share helpful information and resources so that maybe some of you won't make some of those same mistakes that I've seen or that I've made myself. The second goal is to inspire you. I found being an entrepreneur or a small business person often lonely, confusing, sometimes discouraging. You have no idea at times whether you're on the right track or not. I always found hearing from other entrepreneurs and people who help entrepreneurs was always inspirational and helped make my journey as an entrepreneur faster and easier. And I hope the same will be true for you. So, to help with both those goals, I have guests on the show every week who are willing to share their stories and advice. And my guest this week is Deb Curtis. She is the founder of Curtis Business Finance Solutions. And as you'll hear, she helps women and minorities purchase and finance established businesses and helps them get SBA loans. And what's that all about? Well, you're going to hear a lot more in just a minute. Deb, welcome to the Savvy Entrepreneur Show. Thanks so much for being with me this week.
Well, my pleasure, Doris, and thank you for having me as a guest to collaborate together for your listeners.
Thank you. So I just briefly said what you do, but elaborate on that. What is it that you do, and who do you help?
Well, you mentioned SBA loans, and your audience, if they are entrepreneurs, small business owners, or aspiring to be one, many should be familiar with the Small Business Administration, which offers the guarantee to the bank lenders that provide these SBA loans. But what does Deb Curtis do with her business that I established in 2018? I decided after years of working in corporate as a SBA lender, jack of all trades, taking all SBA loan requests, I left corporate to niche down and just support business acquisition finance transactions of established money-making businesses. And then I niched down greater because I saw a demand and a space where I could uplift women and minorities to teach them and empower them on how to become a business owner, transitioning in to one of those baby boomer established successful small businesses that's running like a train and profitable. Too often, we think, geez, if I want to be a business owner, I have to start up one, right?
Right.
Exactly. I think a lot of people that are in corporate today, if you're a seasoned corporate employee and you want to get out, you're like, well, I really don't want to start up a business. Well, those are tough. I don't blame you. They take time to build up 2 to 3 years before you're profitable.
Yeah.
What if I could tell your audience, Doris, if you want to become an aspiring business owner, there are baby boomers selling and looking for their next successor to take over their
Yeah.
Yeah. So
I want to stop you just really quickly. I mean, what you're saying makes a lot of sense, but there's a lot to unpack. And first of all, I think what you're communicating is that there are multiple pathways to entrepreneurship, right? So you can start your own business, or you can, as one of a couple of my other guests, you'll go back and check out the archives. There are a couple of Couple of interviews I did with franchise consultants talking about franchising, which is another pathway. That's kind of an in between. And then, as you're describing, it's really you have the option if you qualify and have the intestinal fortitude and are wired up the right way, which we'll talk more about. You have the option of buying an existing business, and there are some really cool advantages that I think you started to allude to. Before we dig into some of those things, why did you decide to focus on women and minorities in this segment?
Mm. Well, this industry, the micro, small business selling and buying industry. I'm not talking about M&A, big middle market mergers and acquisitions. That's a whole different ball game. That middle market businesses are bigger. I'm talking about our small businesses. A small business could be a solopreneur or 3 employees or 5 or 30 or even up to 500. Those are small businesses. And through my tenure when I worked in corporate America, this industry, it's very male dominated, with business brokers selling the businesses, and then the bank lenders that do conventional business lending and or SBA lending, very male dominated. So I noticed right away through the years that the typical applicant to either start up or acquire a business was also male, a white male.
Right,
And
right.
and I think a lot of it, Doris, goes back to decades ago. You know, men were the breadwinner of the household, and they held the corporate jobs, and they climbed the ladders, and they received, greater income than many of the rest of us. It is what it is.
Well,
There's nothing.
they had greater visibility too to the options that were available. I
Yeah.
mean, I'm not sure how many women, I mean, I think that's changing, but
Mhm.
25 years ago, how many women thought about buying a franchise and opening up their own franchise? I think a lot of women don't think about buying a business, and I think part of it's kind of the way we're wired up
Mhm.
that it seems kind of intimidating, like, wow, this is an established business. That would be really hard to do, or
Yeah.
require more fitting in that I'm used to. And minorities might think the same thing. So yeah, I can see why it's an underserved segment, really. And I'm sure there's a lot of education that you also alluded to that goes with this.
Yeah. And a lot of it, I believe, like you said, well, men tend to have greater networks in the professional arena in corporate America. It is what it is. I mean, I can remember working as the only female on the business banking team, and all of the peers of mine that were commercial relationship managers, they would go to the football games and the basketball games, and I was the only female. I had to stay back and take the phone calls because that's just the way it was. It's,
Right.
it
Right.
was,
And it's less likely, I think, because of those networks, men are more likely to hear of opportunities on the grapevine.
yeah.
And so finding these businesses is a whole other piece that I want to talk about during our chat today. Talk about some of the advantages, though, of buying an existing business as
Yeah, that's,
opposed to starting your own.
I love that because I was going to go into that, and you hit it on the nail with the right question. For the women and the minorities out there, and my goodness, even for the men, because many of them, Doris, many men don't even know about this
No,
opportunity.
that's absolutely true, I believe.
Now, there's a lot of misunderstanding or just lack of knowledge that if I want to be a business owner, I have to start one up. And what if I told your audience that there are baby boomers, 11,000 retiring a day, and out
A
of that,
day?
a day, per day, 11,000. We call this the silver tsunami. Uh, isn't
I
that
like
crazy?
it.
Yeah, it's a silver tsunami, but I love it because I believe, AI is in tech and in the industry right now, and everyone has fear, but we got to think positive of what AI could do to help us. But there are going to be some corporate layoffs and such and seasoned corporate employees may be looking for what is my next opportunity going to be. It would be to transition in as the successor of a baby boomer owned business. So I think of, how should I explain this? A startup, you don't have customers, you don't have vendors yet, you don't have anything. You just have an idea and you're trying to figure out how to make money. You walk in as the successor of an established money making business. You have seasoned employees, you have key employees, and quite frankly, probably key managers that operate the business. And the baby boomer is semi-retired, absentee, perhaps only looking over the business 5 to 10 hours a week, letting everyone else run the show because he trained them up. Well, now he wants to leave full time and retire permanently. What if you are that corporate employee who is laid off, managing a team? Where do I go? Think about these opportunities. You already have the management experience. The seasoned employees are there. Your loyal customers are with the business. The business has a name in the community that's got value. You just need to transition in,
Yeah.
right? It's
It strikes me as a whole different set of skills, but some real advantages for certain kinds of people. I mean, if you were the person that has this amazing idea that you've always wanted to turn into a business, or the kind of person that just wants to do it your own way, or that maybe is somebody who takes just enormous pride in building something from scratch. I think there are those kind of people. Those kind of folks might not find this as attractive, but there's a lot of other entrepreneurs out there who I can't tell you, as a SCORE mentor for a while, I had people coming to me and they would say, I want to start a business. What kind of business do you think I should start? And that kind of question always floored me. And I was absolutely gobsmacked with the number of times I heard it. And that just tells me that your your sweet spot is fertile ground for a lot of people who just they know they want to do something different. They want to think outside the box. They want to put their skills to use in another environment, but they're not the person that just has this burning idea that they somehow need to give birth to. They're wired up a little differently, right?
I agree. Uh, exactly. And I'm grateful and I'm thankful for all of those startup businesses, because we wouldn't have seasoned businesses today to be selling to perhaps seasoned corporate employees that want to either stay in corporate and buy a business or exit corporate and buy a business. And the way you described a startup owner, Doris, they do want to change the world. They just are so eager and ready to roll. And that might not be the right personality to ease into managing a team that's used to things being the way they've been for 20 years, right?
Yeah, exactly. And the other thing that strikes me is it is intimidating for some people, and I put myself in that category, to think about stepping into an existing business. Um, it it has a lot of advantages because, as you said, you've got name recognition in the community, you've got a talented employee base if it's the right company, you've got customers, but one of the things that's appealing for some people as they step into entrepreneurship is that they at least have this, it may or may not be correct, maybe, but this assumption that I'm going to learn as I go. I've never really been great at managing people or never had a lot of chance to manage people. But, as my business grows, if I'm lucky, I'll hire one and then maybe I'll hire three and I'll gradually get my feet wet that way. And I think existing businesses can be a little intimidating sometimes because you need to ramp up quickly on all of it, right? Or is that not quite fair?
Well, I would say that if you're going to transition into a business that's been successful, of course, before acquiring the business, understanding who your people are and ensuring, you want to be good as a manager of people who knows how to ease in, not rock the boat, not want to go in and just blow things up and change things my way or the highway. There is a finesse, and that's called management, right? I look at acquiring an established small business similar to a supervisor taking on a new role that maybe came externally outside of the corporation, and now this new guy or gal, or they're coming in to manage a team, and the team were used to the previous supervisor of 10 years and now they loved him so much he's gone. How do you work that? Well, that's like a business acquisition. And
It is.
the underwriter is going to look for that in your character and on your resume for accolades of managing people, and just in your voice and your business plan. What do you plan to do to retain your people? That's critical. And and a lot of that comes with talking to the seller, which the seller can stay on up to a year with the SBA and help be a consultant. And a lot of times I will suggest to the clients of mine, work with the seller and find out, who is due for a nice raise, who's due for maybe a different title in their position, maybe a promotion, and allow the seller to let you be the one to do it as the buyer when you transition in. Because it feels good right away out of the gates, right?
Yeah. And I suppose that depends on the kind of business. It's, I'm sure, a process of matching up the person who's interested in doing something like this with the right kind of business, because there's a whole spectrum of kinds of businesses, existing businesses out there, as you alluded to earlier. There's everything from solopreneurs, or maybe it's a small business with only 2 or 3 people, in which case maybe extensive management experience and more corporate HR savvy might be a little less important. Or, there's a lot of businesses out there anymore that have very small staffs, or maybe even are a lot of contractors, which might require a different kind of skill set, right?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And you said the word that I use often, a puzzle. These transactions are like putting together a puzzle. You've got the buyer side, that's a certain puzzle piece, and then you have the seller side, that's a certain puzzle piece. And it takes a lot of due diligence between the circle of advisors around the buyer, and I would be one of them, to look at what do those puzzle pieces look like? Who is still going to stay with the business when the seller leaves? What does the seller do today? And there are businesses where the seller really is there full time. And that's okay if this buyer wants to be there full time, and that's fine if they fit that puzzle piece and we have a match, we're good to go.
Yeah. Well, I'm super curious how you find each other out there. Because honestly, if I said I wanted to buy an existing business, I'm not sure I would even know where to look. I know there are things that people that are called business brokers that are out there, but honestly, I wouldn't have a clue of how to find them. And I wouldn't know where to find the people that you're talking about who might be interested in and be a good potential buyer. So Talk about how that happens.
Mhm. I love it. And that's where I found a need for my business because I don't see enough knowledge out there or communities or the SBA even announcing any kind of like first time business buyer workshops. Think of first time home buyers, Doris. Remember back in the day, they were everywhere. First time home buyer seminars. You still have those. We need to get better in our country teaching women and minorities and even just the regular men that don't know about it. How do you become a first time business owner? How do people find me, as you asked? Well, if you Google up how do I buy a business, it tells you to reach out to a business broker. And I beg to differ, and I will always preface whenever you Google or use AI, it's just a tool, it's not the truth. So people pay for SEO. I'm not an internet guru, but I know SEO, if you pay for it, your listing will be put up at the top of Google. So when you enter, how do I buy a business? Many huge business broker firms will come up and tell you to start the process with the business broker, which
Right.
in my opinion is backwards, because just like a first time home buyer, you need to know as a first time business buyer, what do I qualify for?
Yeah.
How much of a business can I buy?
Right.
What type of business? Do I have the good credit? Do I have the right down payment? There's a lot that needs to be done up.
And my skill sets, where do those fit
Yeah,
in the whole spectrum of things of businesses that are out there? I'll share one little story, and you'll probably laugh at this, but I had a client at one point who he wasn't very good at starting up his business. Okay. That's not a new story. That's a sad story that happens all too often. But he had some really cool intellectual property that was worth something and some other assets in the business. And he was interested in selling it. But he chose to go to these business brokers, like the big banks. I'm talking Morgan Stanley and Deutsche Bank, and
sure.
none of them, they just laughed at him. They're like, "You don't fit our profile. That's not what we're looking for."
Mhm.
And yet, there's somewhere out there, there probably was somebody, maybe quite a few somebodies who would have been interested in that set of assets. And I guess that's a whole different piece, is the asset piece. That's not really what you're talking about, but I thought you might smile because that's where he went. He didn't know what to do otherwise, and they just laughed at him. They said, "Go away."
Isn't that something and that goes to tell you that there are business owners out there today that still don't know how to be prepared to sell their business. 11,000 baby boomers a day. Do we think our exit planners have all had an opportunity to reach out to them, and or were they willing to listen to those
Right.
professionals?
Right. And there's a lot of steps. As I mentioned, there's a couple of past episodes in the archives that people can check out. One with Barry Goodman about building value in your business. He talks about it specifically in the context of getting ready to sell your business, but a lot of the lessons of building the value of your business apply whether you're ready to exit your business today or sometime in the future. So you said don't go to the business brokers, and that squares with the story of my poor former client. What should they do instead?
Well, and that can be tricky as well, because then my next thought would be to go to your bank, SBA lender, but they're all not created equal. And it can be confusing. You could call as a business buyer wanting to get ready to buy a business, you could call a big bank and it'll take forever for them to realize who you should really go to. Like, just like you were talking, nobody
It's
really
not a
knows.
question they get often enough, I think.
Oh yes, they do. And it's a chase. Or they give up. Who do I call? Where do I go?
Craigslist, maybe? I don't know. I'm just
Well,
joking.
yeah, right. But then you do have some direct SBA lenders are very solutions focused to help you. And if they can't help you, they'll tell you where to go. Or how many times do you know clients, Doris, businesses that called a bank and nobody called them back?
Right. That's discouraging too.
Yes. So my business is such a niche. I'm just thrilled to be here on your show today to educate your listeners. This is who I am. I help educate people aspiring to acquire established businesses, and I help them get qualified as that first time home buyer did one day, as now a first time business buyer. And then once we know that dollar amount and that industry and what your strengths are, I will vet per the SBA requirements and provide a letter that's a pre-qualification letter for you as a business buyer. So think about the open houses on Sundays when everyone's showing their home for sale.
Yeah.
What do the realtors want to see before you make an offer? I
Yeah.
want to know you're pre-qualified, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's what I do.
That makes sense.
Yeah. Now, the business brokers do have some SBA lenders that they partner with, and they can recommend you, the business buyer, to those lenders. But for my personal preference, I believe if you're a business buyer, you need to be arm's length distance away from the selling side and have your team represent you separate from any recommendations that the seller side is referring you to. That's just,
Interesting.
I believe that wholeheartedly. And so there's your answer.
Yeah.
It's tough to find where to go. So hopefully this conversation will perk some ears and help people.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I want to dig a little more into several things that you've touched on. One of the vehicles that we were talking about, and one that you spend a lot of time working on, is SBA loans. I'm not sure how many people, Deb, I'd be interested in your experience out there. How many people even realize you can use an SBA loan to buy an existing business?
Probably not many, because the first thing that people think about if they want to be a business owner is starting one up.
Yep.
Yeah. Not too many people think, well, geez, I'm going to buy a business today. And maybe it's because, Doris, we're just finally at a time, generation after generation, where baby boomer businesses and the SBA wasn't doing this 40, 50 years ago. So these businesses have seasoned enough where out of many of them, there are some very solid ones that are cash flowing with a baby boomer that wants to get out and retire. We've just
No,
reached
no
that
doubt.
time. We've reached the time.
Well, it might be worthwhile talking about just briefly about SBA loans and how they happen. First of all, SBA doesn't loan the money itself. That much I do know, and probably people who have looked into this know. But
Mhm.
not all banks do SBA loans. And I'm curious, do all banks that do SBA loans even do SBA loans for purchase of existing businesses?
Well, let me give a little bit of my rundown for you and your listeners. As you mentioned, you are correct. The SBA, the Small Business Administration, does not give the money for the loans. And the SBA is an affiliate of our US government. What they do, the SBA, is guarantee up to 75% of the SBA loan that the bank will deliver to the borrower if that loan should go backwards and belly up. So that gives the banks more comfort level, especially when it comes to acquiring an established money making business, to fund an uncollateralized business loan, because the name of the company, the seasoned employees, the longtime vendors of the business, the longtime customers, all of that has value.
Yeah, for sure it does.
Yeah. Intangible value is what we call it in lending, or uncollateralized financing blue sky. That's another way to put it. We're financing air, but it has value. But the bank, if there was an SBA, would conventionally say, we're not taking that risk. This is totally unsecured. $1 million? No, thank you.
Yeah.
Well, now the SBA is saying, if that business that's being purchased can verify it's cash flowing strong with those tax returns, we will guarantee that $1 million loan up to 75% if the loan goes backwards. Doesn't that make an underwriter feel a little bit better?
Oh, it does. Particularly if it's a lender that is truly experienced with SBA loans. I do know from another guest that I had on the show talking about SBA loans in general. And if folks are interested, they should go back and find that interview. But he was talking about how a lot of banks say they are SBA lenders, but not all lenders that are affiliated or that do SBA loans are created equal. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely. And that is what makes SBA lending a frustration for a business buyer to go out there to try to find a loan, because you could call 3-4 different banks in an hour and be told a different story if they're going to lend or not.
Yeah.
Yeah, they all have, the banks all have their own credit policies that they must abide by. But then there's also the SBA SOP, the standard operating procedure, that all those banks must follow their guidelines, the SBA guidelines, to make sure that 75% guarantee stays intact. So
And it was interesting too, because he said there are banks that maybe only do a handful of SBA loans every year, and there's actually a very small number of banks that really, really focus on it. They know how all the levers work, and he really encouraged people who are interested in SBA loans to try to find those, and you probably already know who they are, a lot of them.
well, I know a lot of them, but I'll be straight up and transparent. Many of them can change their in-house credit guidelines. For instance, maybe they financed a ton of restaurant acquisitions, and that bucket, we call it a bucket in loan portfolios, it's just top heavy on the bank balance sheet for liabilities. They have a ton of restaurants. Think of COVID. If you are top heavy with restaurants and COVID hits again.
Oh boy. Yeah.
Yeah. So you could call a bank today and they'll say, yes, that will do restaurant financing. Or for example, when I worked at Wells Fargo many, many, many moons ago, they would do restaurant financing, but they themselves as a bank wanted 50% down on
Oh,
that.
wow.
Yeah. Whereas you could find, I know a different lender that will do a restaurant with 10% down. That's their policy.
Wow. Big, big difference there.
Yep,
If
yep,
you're
exactly.
tight for cash, which most business people starting a business or just buying a business, that would describe most of us, I think.
Yeah, you got it.
The other piece that I found interesting, and again, people might want to go back and listen, but he said there is actually non-bank financing of SBA loans. Now, are there non-banks that finance the acquisition of an existing business, or not really?
Yes, there are. And the webinar that I was on prior to our meeting here today, it was a non-bank lender. And as of today, the SBA has 14 non-bank preferred licenses out there. Only 14. That could change. They may hand out more of them.
And so who are some of these? Some of them are names you might recognize, right? Like, I don't know, Cabbage, is that one of them?
That was one of them, but I believe after the stimulus round, I don't think they're lending anymore. The PPP and the EIDL, that was real popular. I'm not quite sure. There was a lot that happened back then, but those licenses for the non-bank lenders, typically either they are taken away by the SBA because they'll audit loan files to make sure the lenders are following the SOP procedures. And if
Interesting.
there's too many red marks, your license is pulled. And I worked for lenders that were in the middle of those audits, and they're very strenuous, and they are hard work to get through for all the right reasons, because they're guaranteeing these loans.
I think that just underscores your value as a consultant, because what you're describing is a fairly fluid situation. Somebody might have heard at one point this bank was doing X, but it may not be anymore. That may not be their focus anymore. That may not be the right place.
That's right. I'm shaking my head up and down like about a million times here. If there's anything constant in SBA lending, it's change. Whether it's with the SOP itself or the various bank and non-bank lenders. So the message here for your listeners that want to acquire a business: work with a specialist that understands business acquisition financing and has access and knows what lenders are doing what today. It changes.
Talk a little bit more about your own process of how you educate and coach your clients. Do you do a skills assessment, an interest assessment? I mean, there's so many variables and so many different things that come out of people's background, their skill sets, what they're good at, what they want to do. And some people are interested in staying in close to the industry. Maybe they've worked in pharmaceuticals or medical devices, and that makes them a really natural fit. There are a lot of people who escape from corporate who want to do something totally different. Is that even doable for people who want to do that?
Yeah. And that's a very fair question, often asked by seasoned corporate employees that I speak to that want to learn more about, can I get out of what I'm in and acquire a business? Maybe that's, let's say, HVAC, heating and air conditioning. Maybe I'm working with a gal who's really good in a different industry. She understands marketing, she's managed teams, she understands sales, but she doesn't have the hands-on experience to put in a central air unit on a residential home, right?
Right.
Because I know I don't.
No, me neither.
Exactly. What we do, Doris, is look at her strengths. And many chief of credits of past have told me they would much rather have a successor owner come in that understands marketing as it is today, sales as it changes daily, and the people that are the technicians. There's key employees there that have been with the company for a long time. If we get an understanding of the grasp of that, and if it's in a state where maybe there needs to be a licensed owner, we can work things out where maybe a key employee that's been one of the technicians for many years, maybe she, the new buyer, offers a 2% ownership as a retention factor.
Interesting.
Right. And then she just oversees the employees and handles the billing, handles the customer service, marketing, because that's probably what the retired seller is doing today, perhaps, or maybe not. Maybe he's just completely absentee and there's someone else.
Could be. Or though, what I will say I've found with a lot of these business owners, one thing they never want to seem to let go of is the sales side of things. They have all these long-standing relationships with customers, and they watch their families grow up together, and those are hard ones, I think.
Yeah. And thanks for adding that in the conversation here. Two things. We want to understand that the seller isn't the one that has those relationships 24/7.
Sellers, I hope you're listening to this. Listen carefully.
Thank you. We want to make sure the seller trained up some key employees that hold those relationships now. Because if he or she did not, that means they are the business. So if they sell and leave, all those longtime customers, they're going to leave. So we want to make sure there's succession planning where the owner has the key employees raising up those clients and transitioning into them. So when the new owner comes in, it's not such a shock. Now, I would like to say how I believe women, seasoned women, coming into these situations as the successor new owner, and men too, but of course I like women because I feel like we have more of a, I guess, a family feel. I call it like a mama bear. Like we love to take care of people. That's just who we are. We're
Women are
women.
better. I think women are more intuitive than men too.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
that can sometimes be, I'm imagining at least, a really useful asset
Mhm.
walking into an existing situation. Because
I
our
agree.
antennas work pretty well as women, most of us.
Thank you. I feel the same way. And I really believe baby boomers, and most of them are men, they love the women coming in. Like you said, their business is their baby. Their business is their legacy, and they're giving it to somebody to care for. And who better can handle this than women? But there are a lot of men too, trust me, that can do it as well. I'm just trying to get the ears of women popping up open so they know there is opportunities for them if they're stuck on a corporate ladder. This is an opportunity to empower them to climb their own ladder.
We've talked about women. I know you help minorities too.
Mm-hmm.
I suspect that both women and minorities, and that covers a whole spectrum in and of itself, just that word, offer some pretty unique advantages with existing businesses. Talk about that.
Oh, I love that. I helped a transaction. It was a staffing agency down in Florida, and the retiring owner was a white man, just a very hardworking baby boomer. His wife wasn't part of the business, and they had brought up the staffing agency to the point where they just weren't even really working at it. They were enjoying life retired, but still had this business. So, so a gal that I met, she was based in Minnesota, and she wanted to buy this staffing agency in Florida. And her culture was, I'm going to say it right, Hmong,
Oh
HMOMONG.
yeah, the Hmong people.
Yes.
Exactly. Uh
Oh,
that's a whole community up in the Twin. My sister lives there, which is why I'm
okay.
a little
Okay.
familiar with it. But yeah, it's a very distinct
Yeah,
subculture of the Twin Cities area.
got it. So that makes sense. So she has family there, but she wants to move to Florida. And her resume, Doris, was something very familiar with women. She had all this experience in HR and staffing agencies. Her first job was the longest one on her resume, like mine. Things were good in the 90s, I believe. We employers really took care of us. And then as time progressed, you could tell and we walked through it, she was laid off. She was passed over for promotion. Another company merged with another company, so she lost her job. I mean, the stories just kept going on and on. So she had all the experience. So in her business plan, buying this business, this staffing agency in Florida, which was already cash flowing wonderfully. We all know everybody moved to Florida from the pandemic. It's just booming down there. Well, her culture, we discovered there was a need to place a lot of her, not her relatives, just her culture, the people of her culture, to find work because many of them moved to Florida. And
Ah, wow.
yeah,
What a
yeah.
great niche to fill.
So we injected that into her business plan because they want to know how are you going to continue the growth, And here's the good news. It's been 3 years since she purchased that business, and she wants to buy a second one in Florida, another
Good for
staffing.
her. Fantastic story.
It is. That's the magic of women, that they can do this too, just as much as men. And she was the successor of a 20-year man business run by a man. And she went in, and it's absentee still. She, you know what she does in the evening? She puts lashes on people.
How funny.
Yeah, she's just oversees it, and now wants to buy a second one because the employees that he, as you said, all you business owners, listen up. The retiring business owner trained up those employees before he exited. And sure enough, they still run that business successfully, and she takes really good care of them.
Wow. Wow. Well, is it expensive to buy an existing business?
Great question. It is similar to purchase financing a home. Now, depending upon, well, home prices are high today. So the typical business acquisition price that is allowed per SBA lending on average can range from 500,000 all the way up to 5 million. That's the max that the 7A program will allow. Sometimes a little bit more if it's a bank that can do pari passu conventional lending with the SBA lending. My recommendation to any first-time business owner is to stay in something comfortable to get your feet wet.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know, I prefer to see first-time business buyers 500,000, maybe 2 million max,
Yeah.
depending upon experience. And here's the good news. Once you get your feet wet and you're doing well, like this gal that bought the staffing agency in Florida, here it is 3 years later, she can buy another business and SBA will finance it because the total aggregate loan amount allowable per personal guarantor, the owner of the business, is 5 million.
Right.
So
And plus she's got a phenomenal track record already. So I
exactly.
mean, that's sweet music to a lender, right?
It is. And I have clients that have different industries in their portfolio, which I think is brave as well. I think staffing is always going to be an essential need. We've at least I hope it is. But if you're just buying 4 restaurants, that might be a risk, right? You might want to diversify your industries a bit, and you can, because once you become a business owner, you understand the financials, you understand marketing, sales. You better have all that before you buy
Right.
your first business, right?
Right.
So,
Well, and I'm sure some of them don't have it because I'm thinking back to my job at corporate, and I learned a lot and I gained a lot of skills. But when I started my first business, there was an awful lot I didn't know. So how do you help coach people through those gaps and even through the whole due diligence process when potential buyer may not even know all the right
Mhm.
questions to ask?
Oh, yes. I help educate them on the whole entire front end, first and foremost, to get them qualified. And then when we start looking for the right business, there's a lot to look at. And that's another episode perhaps of all the due diligence,
I can
right?
imagine that we could probably talk about that for
Yes,
quite a
we could.
while too.
And a lot of it is a team. It can be a CPA, an attorney. I always recommend an attorney representation experienced in these transactions to help with the due diligence. And I help them understand what the need is. And once, just like when you first bought your first home, it's kind of like having your first baby. You think you can't do it because you've never done it before. You can. You just have to learn. And like you said, Doris, and myself, you learn as you go. Do you make some mistakes? Well, of course, we all do. But that's what makes us stronger. And that's what teaches us how to do it better next time.
Well, I am I'm delighted that you were on this week because I think this is a path to entrepreneurship that not enough people think about because, as you say, there are a lot of businesses out there looking for the right owner. And, um, you know,
That's
it's a
right.
there's some phenomenal opportunities out there, I suspect, for the right purchaser. So I think this is an amazing opportunity for the right person or persons. And there's so much more I think we could talk about, but we're out of time. The time just flew by. If people are interested in learning more, maybe something you said sparked interest, they want to learn more about the SBA lending process or how to find a business or figure out if they're the right fit to do something like this, what's the best way for them to learn more and to get in touch with you?
Yes. My website is my name, debcurtis.com. And there's a contact form in there that will be sent to my inbox if you can just select what you want to reach me for. And then we go from there. If you're looking for more education, which is something that I love to do, I love to mentor and teach. My favorite social media channel is LinkedIn, and you can find me there, Deb Curtis, on LinkedIn. My colors are red, white, and blue for America. I just love small businesses. And the best part of my business is I get to help with the retention and the growth of small businesses in America. So that's the best way to reach me, debcurtis.com, Doris.
Well, I can hear the passion in your voice, and I'm glad that you're out there doing this because there is clearly a need. There's going to be a lot of very sad stories, unfortunately, of amazing businesses that just either sell for a lot less than they could or never find a buyer because there's just not enough information and enough people like you out there doing this. So I'm glad to know about it, and I hope people enjoyed hearing more about it. So thanks, Deb, so much for being on the show this week. It was a delight having you.
My pleasure. And thank you, Doris.
And thanks to all my listeners. You're the reason I do this. You can find helpful information and resources on my website too, which is thesavvyentrepreneur.org. There's a growing library of blogs, tools, all sorts of past radio show interviews that have been turned into podcasts, and other resources are there. It's all free, so check it out. You can also check out my YouTube channel where there's a whole archive of past show episodes. Yes, I know people actually do listen to podcasts on YouTube. It's called the Savvy Entrepreneur Radio Show. You can download issues. Please comment, follow my channel so you'll be notified of new episodes as they come out. And be sure to comment and like episodes because they're full of the stories of fellow entrepreneurs and advisors like Deb today who help those entrepreneurs. They have amazing stories and are amazing sources of advice and resources. So check that out. Join me again next week at 11 a.m. Central Time, where I'll have another great guest. But until then, I'm Doris Nagel, wishing you happy entrepreneuring.